All right. Welcome, everybody, to CDM for this month. We've got one topic on the agenda, one in detail topic. So I'll let Alex take that one away. Is Alex on the call?
Sorry, yeah, I am on
yes.
the call. Sorry, I just was in the middle of screen sharing stuff.
Oh, no worries. If you need,
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. I won't maximize it because that does all kind of strange things. Right. Okay. A bit of an introduction to this. I put together this PR. It's grown a bit out of hand. A lot of people have strong opinions on it, which is highly welcomed. We decided to talk about it at today's CDM. But yeah, anyway, let's get on with it. So, what are we doing? So the background is that my primary development at the moment is erasure-coded direct reads, which, to those who don't know, that is the client is similar to balanced reads, and that the client reads directly from multiple OSDs and then stitches back together the read result. And it is possible that those reads are combined with class execs. In fact, it is very, very common that they are combined with class execs. As an aside, we are also planning on extending erasure coding so that it can fully support class execs. At the moment, it sort of supports them, but it doesn't support anything that needs to do a sync read, which is quite limiting. But there are still use cases in there that are used by RGW, for example. So we want to turn on direct reads wherever we possibly can. Direct reads uses the balanced flag or balanced reads flag to decide whether it's going to do a sync read or not. A split op, as they're called. So we need to be very careful around doing that. Now, just a bit of background, EC direct reads will always send send execs to the primary. But in fact, I think it will even send them to the primary, to a particular OSD, to the shard0, and it must be the primary. Now, an exec must never be executed twice, and there are code paths through EC direct reads to do with failure scenarios where it would be possible to execute an exec twice, and that would potentially cause some data corruption. And additionally, a client must never send an exec to any OSD other than the primary if it contains a write. So a lot of work has been done. A lot of the similar problems exist already with balanced reads to replica, and a lot of work has been done, and I acknowledge that, to the external interfaces, the external class interfaces, to try and make them safer. But there have been bugs that have got through to the field that we know about related to this. So just to quickly, terminology I'm going to use for this presentation, just a class is a set of methods, class methods. People probably know this. A method is a particular operation performed on an OSD that you call through, and an exec is the command to call one of those methods. I just use some shorthand just quickly. So where are we at the moment? Well, currently execs are associated in the OSD with three potential flags. There's a read flag, a write flag, and a promote flag. I'm going to ignore the promote flag for now because it's associated with cache tiering, and cache tiering is deprecated anyway, and it's unsupported, and in my testing, I found it doesn't work at all with balance reads anyway. Or the IO just fails when you try and do a promote. Or if you turn cache tiering on and try and do a promote, it will fail. Now, an exec, if you attempt an exec with a write in it, if that's sent to anything other than the primary OSD, that will be dropped. So it's treated as a misdirected IO, and that goes through the misdirected IO handling and then gets dropped. If you attempt to do an exec and the exec is incorrectly implemented, so it is not marked as a write, but it somehow manages to do a write, then we'll actually return an EIO error. But that's a very strange thing to happen. It means the implementer of the class has done something very strange and made an error, probably just set the wrong flag. And the other thing to note is that client reads at the moment, there is nothing to police that you do not request an exec that can do writes as part of a read op. So you can call the exec function and you can call version increment, for example, and that will actually perform a write on the OSD or attempt to perform a write on the OSD, and it will do it as part of a read op. And there are actually existing routes through the code that I found as part of this work which will attempt to do this. They will attempt to do a write as part of a read op. And I suspect most of the time it just works and nobody notices. But I think it's technically incorrect, and we really don't want it to be happening twice, which is what EC direct reads will very occasionally do. So that's the current state. There are some potential issues in here.
We have Greg raising his hand.
Oh, yep.
Sorry.
Question.
When does the EIO happen if reads are succeeding at doing writes?
Sorry, the EIO here will happen if the class method is flagged as a write. Sorry, it's not flagged as a write and attempts to do a write. But that is an implementation mistake being made by whoever implemented the class method in the OSD. Does that answer
you can flag it from the client as a read and still invoke.
Yeah, so that's not that's a bit of an the comment there is a bit of an aside. I see. The main issue we have here is you can say this is a read and then you can request a write operation.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to do a minor improvement to the OSD policing, and I should note that if anybody's read the PR, this is not what's currently in there, so just be careful. I want to change the misdirected read into an actual failure, an eval, to say that's illegal on this OSD, and I think that will make it easier to debug the problems rather than just dropping a write and then hunting for it afterwards, or dropping it off and hunting for it afterwards. So that's a fairly minor change in proposal 1. So I'm hoping that no one's going to have a particular objection to that. If they do, raise your hand now. Okay. So my second proposal is, the proposals are going to get slowly more controversial, I warn you. So proposal 2 is that for C++ clients, we introduce a new API that is reasonably safe at compile time. Now, I don't think it's possible to make a completely secure one. So this is an intent to make an API that it will protect against cut and pasting errors and typos and things like that, and make them into make it impossible to send or impossible, make it very hard to send a write exec command as part of a read. As I said, it can be defeated by a determined user, but I think we can put quite a lot of C++ traits in there to make that difficult. And this will cover all the C++ interfaces. Sam says it might be good to have an unchecked interface. Where's the chat gone? It might be good to have an unchecked interface for the bindings. The bindings could then enforce a read-write restriction in a language-appropriate way. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit in a minute about. So this is really this is primarily for internal clients, for in-tree clients, as I think they've been referred to, which all use one or other of the C++ APIs. As far as I can tell, the C API is unused. There might be use of the Python and Golang bindings. I think there are actually two interfaces: exec API plus object class API. So yes, there's actually several APIs. There's the NeoRados API, there's the LibRados C++ API, and then there's an IO context API in the object class. You're quite right. I think all of them can be made safe. Explicitly, the IO context one can actually choose whether to send a read or a write based on the nature of the op. Where you're constructing more complicated ops, you need to construct that as part of an appropriate read or write op, or you'll get a compiler error. So my proposal is to implement these new safe APIs and deprecate every single old unsafe C++ API, and convert all internal clients to the new API. And that is work that's already in the PR if people want to look at it. So questions about this part of the proposal, or should we move on to the even more controversial stuff? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I had a quick question. Can you explain about the casual mistakes, cut and paste errors, and typos? Like, what's an example of that?
So, let's say you wanted to increment a version. So one of the classes is called version, and you can increment it with a command called inc. And let's say the reference code you used was a read. So you found something that said version read, you just cut and pasted that, and you changed read to a write. If you just did that, that would end up going through in the old code as a read, but it would actually perform a write. So that's the kind of thing I want to protect against.
I see.
And I don't think much of the time it's particularly obvious from the API. And one example, and I'll get to your question in a second, Casey. One example is the IO context exec, which always gets routed through as a read, which I thought was interesting. Okay, Casey.
Yeah, just on that point, that relates to your first proposal of the OSD enforcement. So mistakes or typos by developers will just fail on the OSD, and we'll catch that in testing.
Yes, if we test it, it will fail. I think where compile time safety is possible, we should do it personally. But yes, I think how safe is this? So we will not catch the double write. I think if it's double write, always goes to the primary. Then that would be difficult to spot, and would be quite rare to hit it. So this is a failure scenario where, let's say you split a read across multiple OSDs in direct reads. One of those reads fails or gets returned with E again. The way EC direct reads deals with that is to retry the entire original ob unsplit to the primary, and so that would redrive the exec.
The problem on the OSD, one of the problems is that the OSD thinks it's processing an object read operation, but there are execs labeled as writes, which only the server really knows in the current design. So can we detect that case and reject it with an error?
We could look for the write flag and say if there's an exec with a if there's exec with a write in it and there's no write flag set, we could reject that. The issue, we can write code to do that. The issue with that is I think there are old clients out there that do this and will expect it to work. And I'm concerned about breaking OSDs. I'm concerned about breaking old applications with a new version of an OSD.
I think it's important enough that we detect and fix cases like that, and it could be announced with a release note that it's starting to be enforced.
Okay. I will definitely note that down and I'll add it, because that surprises
when you say clients
me.
are doing this, you mean like old RBD clients, right? Or what's?
So I'll give you an example. Basically, iocontext.exec at the moment always sends a read. So no matter what you use it for, it will always send a read. But there are definitely pieces of code in tree that will send writes as part of those execs. Maybe there are things that never get executed. I don't know enough about the code base to, I'm afraid, that level of code enough about what we're changing to know that those never get sent.
Yeah.
Would one of those examples be, I think you mentioned in the PR, one of the tools, I can't remember, it was one, would that be an example of that? It was one of the just kind of separate programs in the tools directory.
I think there's certainly one of the separate programs in the tools directory. I would have to go and review the code again, I'm afraid, to go and figure out what those are.
Well, I would say that stuff like that we very likely don't care about, and it should just get fixed.
Don't care about in
the sense that we can break it, break it all you want, like no one cares. It's much more important to get this enforced than to worry about those. If it is a major, if it's something in the RBD IO path or the RGW IO path that does this today, still, I would be very surprised. If there is something in the tree that does this, but it's one of those obscure, like maybe a test tool or just like a helper program that can be, we don't even need a release note for that.
Okay. I in that case, it's a strong opinion to increase the policing on the OSD. I will get that implemented, I think. Maybe I'll raise that as a separate PR to separate the discussions out, because this one's got quite busy. There's a anonymous fellow Jitser.
Sorry, I forgot to mention my name. Just a quick idea in that regard. Would it be helpful to have like a warning state in the cluster manager, so that you can have, like with Ceph Health, you see that you're potentially using an old client and that will be deprecated, so we can get feedback from users if they're using some of this code. So because I was a little bit confused when you just mentioned make it just a release note, and then it got scary when things might break. So eventually we can just detect it and inform the customers upfront.
That was certainly closer to what I was originally planning. what you're proposing. It sounds like people want to go further than that. So we should. I think I want to separate this out to a separate PR and put the policing in a separate PR to the compile time policing. So let's have that discussion outside. So do we think that there are clients that do this externally? So Sam
Well, I mean,
says,
forget externally. Like, sorry, doesn't everything use the IO context exec? Or I haven't looked at this in a while. Like, you're saying this very casually, like we have this problem, but that sounds like everything is doing reads, probably.
Yeah. The problem is with all of this code is that everything's just called exec. So so separating out the various different types of exec is quite tricky to explain. So there's perhaps a better name is there's a one-shot exec where you basically say, I'm going to perform this exec operation, and it happens synchronously or asynchronously if you're using AIO, but you're not combining it into a complicated op with other reads and writes and things. And I think when I refer to the IO context exec, that is really what I mean. I really mean the one-shot API. But you're right, all the other APIs go through IO context. Casey.
Yeah, thanks. I absolutely agree that the IO context exec function is ambiguous with respect to reads versus writes, and I think that we should deprecate that. Yehuda did catch that in his balanced reads work fairly recently and fixed the cases in the Ceph tree that he found. If there are remaining ones, then deprecating will identify those.
Okay. So that is part of this work, but I can make that a separate part if we don't want to do everything. Okay, and Sam?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, we can break some things, but we can't break prior versions of RBD, that particularly kernel client versions, or RGW or CephFS. So this is less a question of is it possible for someone to have broken the rules, and more a question of we need to audit which previous versions did break these rules and find out what the best mitigation is, because we can't just require people to upgrade their kernels. Let me put it that way. And it's debatable whether we can require people to upgrade their librd versions on anything less than like a 2-year basis. So it might be something more like we enable a configurable strict mode that isn't on by default for at least a few years. So we need to figure out what the actual damage is before we decide to do something like that.
Yeah, well, one proposal we had here was to assert based on the misdirected IO flag. And we think that's only turned on in tautology typically. But maybe we need an explicit flag for it rather than piggybacking on another one.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with having it fail in tests, by the way. That's how we'll find out if it's breaking something. Basically, we can't break people's existing clusters.
Yeah, okay. Noted. Okay. Let's move.
Sorry, can I make one final comment about the compile time safety aspect?
Yeah.
As I pointed out in the pull request, the in-tree uses of CLS for them, at least the vast majority, are using CLS client interfaces from client.h headers rather than calling exec directly. And those methods do have compile time checks for the arguments, whether they're object read operation or object write operation.
Yes, those are already safe. Those operations, and the compile time checking verifies they are safe. I think previously that must have been done through code inspection. So that's in the implementation was checked through code inspection, because it does eventually end up calling the old exec functions or the existing exec functions.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the reason that Librados uses strings for the exec functions is so that it's open to extension and doesn't depend on server code. Whereas compile time safety essentially requires that coupling?
Yes. So that is an aspect I'm going to talk about later on of the how extensible this interface really needs to be.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Radek.
Well, my just a really quick note. I think it was odd or it was intended, but we will get back to this later.
Yeah. Okay. I think yeah. That fits more with the later parts. So I think this has proved controversial as well. So one proposal I had was, where possible, if we cannot accurately determine that a exec is definitely a read through compile time safety, then we should mark it as a write. Flag it as a write because it's safe, at least for writes to do reads. And I think the problem this causes is one of performance. So it's partly that the direct reads or enhancements won't apply, and it's partly that they'll enforce some ordering and some lower performance code paths in the OSD. Yes, Sam. Sam, you have your hand up.
Sam, you're.
Oh, I was still muted. Sorry.
Yeah.
There are two dimensions to this problem. The first is actually old binaries, if you will, ones that were created prior to the existence of this direct read optimizations. I argue that we don't care much about them. As long as they get directed to the primary can tolerate them and deal with them as though they were writes. That's no issue. It's newer distributions of code after this that we're worried about, right? So we can solve this by updating all of at least the internal users to send the correct type, which is, I think, the only way to handle this.
Yes, and we think that's largely been done already, but it's not compile time policed.
So, yeah, it's a little tough to do in Python, I suppose. I think it's okay for a new client that we think is fixed to get an error if it does the wrong thing, because it will have never worked.
So we need to do some versioning based on the client version. Okay.
That's one way to play it. Yeah, I think that would make sense.
Okay. Radek?
Python. That's the huge degree of freedom. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't know whether this is a real problem. Whether there's any real audience for this feature.
For
executing something, for executing a Ceph method.
Executing a Ceph method outside of an in-tree client.
Yes, especially especially one written in Python.
I'm going to ask Casey about this because I think Casey had some examples of why you'd want to do this.
Do we have any generic generic purpose Ceph class? My view is that mostly it's the only interested parts in calling a Ceph class are basically our internal clients. RGW wants to call RGW related Ceph classes. That's my assumption. I'm not sure it's true.
I think there's some locking protocols and there's some version.
CLS lock, yeah. I think it's just I think
now,
it must be RGW.
To preview something I say later, I'm proposing that external clients really shouldn't care about how the op is implemented. The thing they're trying to do, what they care about is doing things like locks. They shouldn't be caring about doing things like execs. But I think that's one for later. So let's focus. If we could focus on the mark legacy execs as right. So the upside of this is I think it gives us safety. The downside is there's a performance issue. There is a halfway house here. We could instead mark the op in the client as in such a way that it cannot be split. So that would mean that EC direct reads would never retry it twice. Yes, Casey.
Yeah, sorry, I don't see Patrick here, but he did raise this topic in the PR review, pointing out that some clients may only have read permissions to a pool. So if read execs were turned into writes, those would just not work.
Yes, this is a concern. I believe that was discussed before. I mean, Bill, did you've had that discussion? I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought is it's going to be very hard to have a class interface where you only ever do reads. I think most class interfaces, whilst some of the calls will be read calls, there'll be write calls in the same class that you need to use as well. I mean, you could just about imagine having a class that kind of, when you read an object, it summarized it and gave you a summary of that object as a kind of class that was purely read only. But I don't think we've got any examples of any classes in the code that only have read methods, or only have read methods that would be useful on their own without also using the write methods.
So I've got two questions. One is, how are we going to mark these as legacy execs as right? This is just going to be client side, right? So any actually old client is still not going to have this behavior. So is there
the purpose of
value to it?
Yeah, the purpose of this is to prevent the it's first of all to prevent the EC direct reads from ever retrying an IO twice that might be a write, might have a write in it, because I think that might lead to data corruption. The second part is just really one of correctness, and I'm thinking about people recompiling old clients old applications against new clients.
Right, but mostly they're not going to do it. They're just going to use their existing binaries on their existing, librettos.
And see the previous discussion there. Yeah, Sam.
I don't think you need to worry about people recompiling their applications against old, or their old applications against new librettos. For one thing, you can make it not compile, which is a reasonable choice. Two, they need to read. If it's really not an in-tree usage of librettos, they should be reading the patch notes. If they break their cluster that way, it's on them.
So, in that case, why are we deprecating? Why don't we just remove the old interfaces?
See, that's my feeling. If we can update the code base as it currently exists, I think we should just do that. The reason for deprecating it would be that we don't feel like doing that work all at once. But if we're willing to do it within our code base, I think we could just do that, as long as we tolerate old binaries correctly. That is, we preserve the behavior they've come to expect. Because they won't have object or support for EC direct behavior, that should be fine.
Okay. So the PR in its current state corrects all internal clients, and so everything there's no deprecated warnings anywhere.
So I think that's fine. It might make sense to send a message to Ceph Devel to see if anyone has an objection to this, like a good objection, not a theoretical one. In which case we can consider that. But if the people in question aren't reading Ceph Devel and don't care, then I don't really think it's our problem to worry about them.
Okay.
Yeah, like you're going to need to go through like the librettos versioning rigmarole, which I'm actually not sure we've versioned so as to remove things, but just go, like, you'll just figure it out because it is versioned just poorly.
What about?
Yeah, I was thinking that if we deprecate, we could do that without having to bump the SO version. But if we remove things, then we absolutely do.
What about a? Okay, that's so a BI for binary. Do we need to maintain that compatibility?
That has always been a goal. I'm not sure how good we've been at it.
I mean, we're pretty good at it. We've definitely run old stuff against new systems.
Yeah, because I was actually one of my big outstanding questions on this whole PR is how do I test that? I don't really know how to go and compile or link an old client against a new. So I think I can probably figure out a way of doing it, but I was kind of hoping there would be some test harness somewhere that was going to go and do it. But
I mean, because the rules changed, we explicitly don't want that to be possible. So I think that's the point of incrementing the SO version. It should completely prevent that from being possible.
Well, no, the running an old client against the new cluster is what.
Yes, that's different. You simply build the client at the relevant Git version and run it. There are also upgrade tests that do that. A variety of them.
Oh, there are some. Okay.
Yeah, if you look in the Rados suite, there are tests that will run prior kernel and client versions against the current suite.
Okay. I think this is
the current version rather.
This is rapidly turning into an education session for me, so I'll take that. I'll take that
away
from
no worries.
the public audience.
Most of us don't actually know about this unless we are asked about it and thus forced to think about it.
I might send you some messages later to clarify. Okay.
Just a correction. I don't think the upgrade suite does anything with older kernels.
Oh, it doesn't.
I don't think it even used to. We did have a couple of jobs in the kernel RBD suite where we kind of maintained, or I maintained a branch and kind of packages built for a very old, for a couple of kind of older kernels. But that had to be retired about a year ago because those older kernels simply stopped booting with newer systemd versions, since our frog images that get installed, that get provisioned on CPA nodes, get upgraded, eventually just stopped working. So I retired those. I think the only way to make at this point to introduce coverage for like a variety of older kernels would be to do this in virtual machines and boot those kernels in virtual machines with appropriate distros so that there is no conflict between a very new kernel and a very old user space. But that was the extreme case because one of the jobs, it was actually a kernel from at this point about 10 years ago, and that worked up until a year, maybe a year and a half ago, for sure, because we had that test. It's no longer there. So I think the only kind of easy test that can be added to the upgrade suite is to just using the distro kernel of whatever distro that the upgrade suite is running on. To this would be just an older kernel, but it won't be that old, right? It would be if it's an Ubuntu LTS, then it would be maybe 3-4 years old, but it's not going to be like possibly not even that because they do backport stuff, and sometimes they actually carry backports which are which aren't even upstream. But this would work only for Ubuntu because for CentOS kernels, there is typically a lot more that gets backported by our own teams, and therefore an older CentOS-based distro or RHEL-based distro isn't really all that old as far as the subnets are concerned. But that's a segue. That's not really related. I just wanted to mention this because to correct the assumption that there is all the kernel client coverage.
Okay, thank you. Acknowledged. Any more questions on the proposal 3 before I move on? Okay. So proposal 4 is a bit more controversial. That I want to just deprecate the C level read interface because we can't make it compile time safe. In tree, nobody uses this. You can delete this or deprecate it and compile everything, and nothing changes. So we could potentially just delete that. So I'd like to see what reaction is to that. Sam.
Do we use these for language bindings?
No.
Oh, okay, great. Then I don't care about them.
Really, John? Do we not? Since I just like, do we expose object classes via the Golang, or I don't know if you deal with bybind?
We do expose object classes via Golang, but we don't use this interface that I want to deprecate.
So when you say C read interface, do you it might have been if the site included the specific functions that with exact function names, it would have been, I think, better for the purposes of the discussion, because we have enough confusion with kind of at least three, maybe 4 different execs in the
Yes.
In the C++ API, and I'm not sure how many there are in the C API. So if you maybe update that later with those functions.
So in the C API, there's a what I was referring to before as the one-shot exec. I believe that is what is called by Golang, Python, and of course Rust. Thank you, Casey. So there is also a read and write method where you can add an exec to a more complex read or write operation. So the write operation is safe because it's clearly a write. It's adding to a read that is the thing I want to deprecate. And I don't think that's in any way exposed via the bindings. So I want to keep the exec calls. Yep, Sam.
Correct. So the worry here is that it can't be checked at compile time. Fair enough. But we can't entirely trust that anyway. So the plan was to enforce this at the OSD, right? At least for modern clients.
Yes, that's that. Yeah, that's the new plan. I think is do a versioned assert in the OSD, or maybe not assert. That's a failure. Yeah.
Return an EIO, yeah. Or an appropriate error. So in that case, I actually don't think it's necessary to deprecate the C read interface. If a user of the C API messes up, they'll get an error.
Okay.
But arguably, if no one's using the C API at all, should we keep it, period? I thought we kept it around for bindings. If we don't, then what's the actual usage of it?
I will go and double check the binding claim that I've just made.
No, I think you're right, because everyone else agrees too. But what I'm like is, can anyone think of a good reason to keep the C API?
I mean, it's using a C++ API is a nightmare. So any external users are probably using this.
Yeah, no one uses the C++ API anywhere outside of Ceph.
Yeah, but do people use the C API outside of Ceph?
Well, at the very least, for bindings, it does get used, and the question is now which exec, because again there are multiple sets of this exec calls. So which exec one is being used and potentially, and can potentially be deprecated is that can probably be discussed separately. But just kind of the general point is that as far as external users are concerned, the C interface is what they will be looking at, and for example, we talked about potentially bumping the SO version and all of that. I think that would all apply only to the C interface. We've never really, I think there were attempts, but we've never really kept any kind of compatibility. Whether we've tried to maintain some kind of API compatibility, but we've definitely never maintained API level compatibility for the C++ interface. Like the buffer list class is imposed, is exposed there, and that keeps changing. So there's no way that could have ever worked. So I think for the C++ API, we can do pretty much anything with it. But for the C API, if there is, even if we don't have any users that we know about, unless we want to go through the exercise of bumping the SO version and figuring all of that out, just leaving those calls in there and relying on the OSD retraining an error seems good enough to me.
Well, there's a better reason not to do it other than just being annoying. If there are real users of this, then we probably want them to be able to use the EC direct optimizations.
Yeah, I mean,
the read interface at all.
Yeah.
So we would simply have to accept that it can't be checked at compile time and enforce it on the OSD.
Yeah, so that's yeah. So I think we just having I don't see anything wrong with having a safe interface and an unsafe interface, and if the C bindings have more kind of on the unsafe side, that's fine. We can deprecate all of the unsafe stuff, or even completely remove all of the unsafe stuff on the C++ side, because again, that we have much more control there and can change things there. For the C interface, it doesn't cost us anything really, and we need to have the runtime check on the OSD side anyway, because that has to be 100% reliable. Whereas all of these, compile time checks using C++ traits and stuff can still be bypassed. So the checking has to be there on the OSD side, and we can just rely on it in the C bindings or in the C API case. Just that's kind of my take.
We can also add safe C interfaces to the C bindings, and then we don't have to deprecate things. Several times we've realized we messed up with an API, and so we've just written the same API with _new appended or something, or renamed it so that the new one is the existing name, and then we keep the old ones around with _old and link them to everybody who are set up appropriate linkages. So we could send these in as different Rados ops and only accept the new versions of the Rados ops for EC direct reads and perform all the checking we want on those. I think this might make your life easier, Alex.
Yeah, I think there's resistance to marking these as writes. I need to figure out how exactly to just block direct reads. But yeah, I'm sure I can figure that out. Sam?
I mean, I think my specific concern is if there are real users that care about performance using the C API, then we care about performance on the C API. If there aren't, then we don't. I think that's the...
Yeah, and it sounds like we don't think there's any of this particular off, at least. Radek?
Just a generic things. First of all, I think that the C++ API isn't so much part of being public. I think we cut from our guarantees on its stability. I perceive it personally as more internal than public. So this boils down the question into just the C interface. We are dedicating tons of attention to it. C, making, I believe, an implicit assumption is a first class passenger of of our API set, of the lib Rados API. And this is the thing I'm absolutely not sure about. Some legacy. I think, in very short, I think that entire exec concept is a half-baked. We started from an idea of allowing all clients to customize, to be able to ship some code to be executed at OSD site. That was the purpose behind introducing both exec interface and the object class API, then API, I believe. However, it backfired for the security reasons. We stopped, we taken back, and now all clients can exec on is just a basically frozen, predefined set of Ceph classes of plugins and methods. And if that's I'm absolutely sure about, if it's not so useful for third-party clients, if the set of those plugins isn't useful for third-party clients, then perhaps the entire exec can be degraded into internal thing. Perhaps I would start from deprecating this part of the C API, just the exec method, and see whether anybody is really using it.
So I'm fairly sure that people are using the Rados op exec API. I think they may well not be using Rados read op exec and Rados write op exec. So I think I'm going to break that down. I think there's actually two different proposals here. There is, firstly, why don't we completely remove the exec implementation from the headers, from the public, as it were, headers for out-of-tree clients in C++. And it sounds like people think that no one uses the C++ clients outside of us anyway, so I can 100% go and check that those all work. Then there's the C interface, and I think there's two aspects to that. There's the should we get rid of the exec interface entirely and replace it with a set of ops that we think clients should actually be doing. So if we think they're doing locking or versioning, then we should provide locking and versioning APIs rather than exec APIs. So Greg asked, when do we restrict object classes? I don't remember that happening. Do you know the answer to that, Radek?
Sorry, I was writing a comment. I got distracted. Would you mind repeating, please?
You said that we locked it down and
stopped
letting them do what they wanted, and I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it was never made public. I think this was the first idea and the main reason for calling the object class an API, because API object class OBJ class is the interface between a plugin and internal part of OSD.
Yeah.
And my intake is that we were planning to allow clients to develop their own code, their own plugins. That when they were supposed to be shipped and then executed through execs. However, this backfired. But the absolute pre-requirement for this is having a public interface between those plugins. this is obj class, and I think that it's basically useless for third parties right now, because in order to customize the behavior of an exec, somebody needs the full access to the health system of OSD.
Yeah, which is the whole point, because we can't, because, you know, if you could, yes, we did once upon a time talk about letting clients like Librado's clients ship executables off to the OSDs and execute them. We called that because, you know, then they can eat up the OSD process. So that never happened. But, you know, and the cluster administrator who's building their cluster for a purpose is perfectly capable of deploying a new object class, and that's what this is for.
Correct.
So
Entirely
yes,
correct.
that is a thing we should keep around.
The question I simply don't have an answer for is whether whether people are really using this in the field, because, well, it's complex. It's really complex to write to write even writing a plugin is complex. Then deploying it in a cluster, it's also hard. I don't think we have any that Ceph IDM nor Rook have any facilities for doing that. So it's possible, but impractical, perhaps.
Yeah, okay. So yes, Sam's worried that we're overdoing this, and it is possible there are actually no users of this. But I think it's a functionality we want Liberados to have, and that we need to support stably. And we have a lot of users who never talk to us because we keep stuff just working for them. Sam?
Well, again, there's no reason we don't need to prevent people from execing classes. The proposal here is to simply provide a way better interface for using it that hides exec as the mechanism and exposes these different headers, right? That's the part I'm arguing is too much work. I think we should keep the existing mechanism where you can exec whatever you want as long as you set up the inputs correctly. We simply need to restrict the tags on the ops and have the OSD protect itself from missent IOs. I think that's a pretty good middle ground.
Okay. I think that's quite clear. What about the Rados read op exec? Would you want to keep that?
Yeah, because I think there are really two cases. Either we care about the C API or we don't. If we do, then we want users of it to be able to exploit your new high-performance direct read mode. If we don't, then I think we should get rid of the C API entirely.
So we are okay. Okay, and we're just okay with just client-side policing of this.
Well,
sorry,
OSD
side.
Rather.
Sorry, yeah, OSD side policing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I understand that. I will update the PR to match that. Radic.
There is some price of this extra flexibility. I think you faced this problem in your pull request. There was the discussion about object class, about guarding it, because if we want this kind of flexibility, it means that we also need to have a full-blown, truly public interface between the plugins and the object and internals of, well, two OSD flavors, because Crimson is involved here as well. It's good to us, I believe. So I would prefer to not pay this price if there is no real usage for it. I know it sounds cool to offer this super duper flexibility, but it has a price.
But isn't that all, like, that's already there, right? That's not like the addition of direct reads, which, as far as I think this whole discussion, apart from the additional concern that EC direct reads could be that there is now a way to execute, to essentially attempt to re-execute the op, and that the write would get executed twice. With that concern put aside, it's the same as the balanced read situation that we already have today. That right. So we already like all of this is already on the table. The discussion is just about at least the necessary like the thing that is necessary with the new EC direct read stuff is policing on the OSD side, and I think that has to be there regardless of what happens on the client side, because the client can malfunction as well. So the OSD needs to protect itself, because that would be the last kind of the last defense against the potential data corruption. The OSD needs to be able to reject the op just based on the kind of the binary, the bits that it gets from the messenger, without regard to whether the client was compile time safe, whether it wasn't, was it Python, was it C++, like that's completely irrelevant at that point. So that has to be there, and then we can add some safe or safer APIs on top of that, right? So I think that's like hiding the entire exec. That's that's really taking kind of the scope of this discussion completely, kind of somewhere else outside of the PR that Alex kind of started with.
Okay, I think we should take out proposal 5 from this. Maybe if we want to discuss that, we should put it into a separate PR. Radek.
I think you already had to modify the object class API. So it's very related to the direct read, and at the moment the compile time safety is solely about a client sending the properly write or read only marked operation to be checked against the declarations of a plugins of a programmer who wrote the plugin. We are simply verifying whether there is the match on both sides, on client side and at OSD. And I believe it could be extended way further if we are able to divide the object class into smaller, into a subset, into a read-only subset, and the full-blown write allowance one. That way, you could and also validate that even the plugins itself aren't doing something stupid. Like, let's say there is no CLS method marked as read-only that actually does some kind of, let's say, OMAP modification to exemplify. But this would be way easier if we don't need to call this interface public. If somebody wants to have full-blown public exec, he also or she also needs to have the full-blown object class being public.
Radek, it sounds like you're arguing that we should kill object classes being exposed to clients or something, which I don't understand.
Absolutely no. I think it makes most sense for. I think it makes sense only for internal clients. It's questionable whether it makes sense for third parties, because deploying the code is simply hard.
Okay, well I'm gonna knack that, and if you want to have that discussion, then you should set up a separate call for it, because taking over Alex's time is kind of mean. Like, that's a way bigger scope and description of what we want Ceph to be than this technical issue.
I have a bit of doubt because object. C++ API is not so it's not used behind internal clients, I believe. So it basically boils down to what we are doing with the C Raiders API exec call. This is precisely about in the scope of this call. It has simply broader consequences.
Yeah, I think I've taken on board what you're saying. I think it is, if anything, it's a separate PR. I don't think we need to do any of this.
The full-blown, the bigger rework of object class. Yes, that's completely different story.
So
you already modified the registration part of obj class.
Yeah. So we're past time. What I'm going to do, I think have we got any non-IBMers on here who desperately want to participate?
By the way, we do have 2 hours actually scheduled for CDM. So
we
don't worry
have
about
2 hours.
time. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure I can do 2 hours.
Yeah.
So what I was going to propose doing is writing up what I can remember. Hopefully, I can get a recording of this and play it back.
Yes, I'll have the recording for you.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll write up some notes and write up some proposals on the IBM Slack channel, which I've got on this. If you don't know where it is, please Slack me. If you're not on IBM Slack and you want to participate, then please Slack me on the Ceph Slack.
Would it be worth creating a separate channel for this on the upstream Slack so that all the discussion can be public?
Yes, I'm just worried about its 3-month lifespan. That's all. So I think it probably is also worth putting something there and then duplicating it into the IBM one. Because the IBM one at least has a longer history.
Well, just put your notes on the dev list, and people can talk there if there's anything that needs to be said.
Yeah, I would like to summarize it to the IBM one first. We can boil it down to some salient points, and then I'll put it on the dev list. Discuss it in friendly and safe first. Okay, I think that's actually all I had. I got up to proposal 5. I'm going to go through roughly what I remember from this. I think we want to do a better version of proposal 1 that does better policing with some versioning, and I'm happy to go away and implement that. I think proposal 2 was not met with 100% support, but I think there's a majority support there. What's the thought there that we want to introduce just the C++ part of this safety, ignoring all of the C and bindings?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
I hadn't realized that we had given up on ABI compatibility for that, but if we're comfortable, then I'm for it.
Well, that's why to the ABI compatibility, I was proposing just deprecating to maintain ABI compatibility. In fact, I think everything I've written so far, I've tried to maintain ABI. But from what I've understood from others here is that we have given up on ABI.
Well, I'm not sure if that has been kind of made official, but honestly, I don't think it has ever worked, and no one's ever really. Maintaining ABI compatibility for C++ interfaces is extremely hard. There are tools to help with that, and we've never used any of those. And based on the fact that all of the major C++ APIs expose the buffer list class, because that's how the data is passed in and out, and that class kept changing over the years. I just don't think, I know Kifu and possibly some others tried to kind of namespace it at some point, and we still have some remnants of that in the form of the 15_2 prefix in the namespace for the buffer list, or similar things. But I honestly don't think it ever worked. So practically, I think you can assume that ABI compatibility is just not there, and that should make your life easier.
Do we want to verify that there aren't some secret clients out here who want to use this, who will care about this deprecating, and we don't want to hurry them, or should we just delete it rather than deprecating, go through a deprecating phase?
I really don't think my thought was that for about one release a decade ago, we tried to maintain compatibility on the C++ API, and then we realized we couldn't and just stopped. So
you think just delete?
I think you would be sending a communication to the dev list as discussed, so you can mention it there. If anyone complains, we can reconsider. But otherwise, I would support just deleting the stuff that's no longer needed, or is no longer useful.
Do we want to expose the new interface outside internal clients?
I
mean, if you want people to, like, compile time checks are good. So unless it's a big load, then I think we should try and get people to switch to it if they're using it.
The question was because it sounded like we didn't think anybody was using the C++ API anyway, in which case it makes the whole thing somewhat academic, I guess.
Alex, my understanding is that you are proposing actually two things. First part is removing from the C++, and we're talking solely about C++ API now, removing the old execs, those not compile time safe.
Yeah, and I think we've confirmed we are doing that bit. Yeah, go on.
Now you are adding to it the proposal to actually not expose publicly as a part of our official, fully guaranteed with the stability actually the new compile time safe variant, which actually restricts the exec functionality solely to C, the C API. I think that would be fine.
So you think we should remove it and make it an internal interface?
I think so. Maybe not removed in the terms of our internals, but I would stop claiming it's the first class citizen of our public interface.
Any
well,
other... Sorry, go on, Greg.
That's a separate discussion. And if you want to do that, Radic, then, like I said, start up your own email threads, because I'll fight you. I think Casey's going to fight you, and it's not fair to have that conversation here. Like I said before.
I'm just not sure what that really buys us.
Okay, in that case, I will keep them in the public API. That's fine. I think that's easier. And I would actually say if no one's using the C++ interface. So I think my take would be, if no one's using the C++ interface outside the tree, then the whole thing is somewhat academic anyway. And might as well keep it in there if it's just an academic discussion. If they are using it, then we want the execs in there, I think. Or we want to do what I was proposing earlier and expose the wrappers, the client interfaces, as part of the public API. And as Sam pointed out, that's a significant amount of work. So I think we should. I think I want to keep them in here.
Yeah, and I think regardless of whether it's academic or not, I think the premise that we need to maintain is that the C API and the C++ API should be equally expressive. We cannot have something that can be expressed through a C API where something can be called, and then for that to not be available through the C API where the user simply swaps the liberators.h file for the liberators.hpp file and adapts their code accordingly. I think there has to be this is a very kind of basic assumption that, okay, you have the C API, you have the C++ API, and they're more or less identical. With, each has maybe its own quirks, right? Caused by, the language. Maybe one is more unsafe, the other is more safe, but they need to, as far as expressiveness is concerned, they need to be on par. So hiding something that is exposed to the C API, hiding that completely in some internal header file for the C++ case, I don't think that's acceptable.
Okay, understood. So proposal 3, market legacy execs is right. I think we said no to this. We instead want to improve the policing and make sure that anything using the legacy exec doesn't go through any of the split op EC direct read code. I think that's fine. And we are not going to do proposal 4 or 5. Okay. I think I've got everything out of this that I wanted to get out of it. So if anybody's got any other topics to discuss either on this or anything else, then please go ahead.
Thank you, Alex. This is a very comprehensive slide, so appreciate that. Doesn't have to be right now, but if you get a chance, would you be able to send me your slides so I can upload them along with the agenda for people to look back at?
Yep, I will do. And
Sounds good.
from me as well, thank you everyone for it's really nice to have these debates about stuff that's so level-headed and and unemotional. It's really good. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll have the recording. We'll get that uploaded via Anthony and share that with you so you can have that to look back on as well. All right. Any other comments or topics that are not on the agenda that people want to bring up?
I've got a quick one if no one else has anything prepared.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, I don't have slides like Alex. I'm not nearly as prepared. But I sent out an email. Well, I'm embarking on a larger term project in Cephs to enable something that we're calling fast clones. You can take snapshots in Cephs and it fully supports that. But like RBD clone is really useful, and we have nothing analogous in Cephs, so I'm trying to build that. And I have put out a few internal communications and one on the public lists to sort of prepare for that and start working on it. The first piece is that I want to build a new Rados operation that returns from a write the newly allocated space and the impacted snapshots on every Rados write operation. So I sent out an email to that, I think on like the 19th or 20th, and Sam replied to me, and I haven't gotten back to him yet with the holidays. But if you're interested in things like that, then please, go find the thread on the dev list. I will have more comprehensive stuff to discuss at probably the next CDM, both about that operation and the overall Cephs design architecture and data structures, because we want to finally actually be able to say to someone, oh, hey, you have allocated 4 megabytes of this 18 megabyte file, and this snapshot is taking up 27 megabytes, and expose that information, because it's a thing people have asked about a lot over the years. And as we're moving into more applications and markets, then it's becoming more critical that we be able to expose that, in addition to the functionality of being able to do a clone for things like making our Cephs mirror daemon useful for georeplication and having a reasonable uptime in case of an actual failure, instead of needing to sit there and manually copy every file out as just a normal client. So mostly it's an ad. Go find the email thread on the dev list if you care about stuff like the size of the PG log in the OSD, because I'm going to make it at least a little bigger, which so far no one's told me I can't do, but I am somewhat nervous about.
Do you remember what the subject of the email was that people can search for?
RFC, allocation returning write-off.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Casey.
Yeah. Yep.
Greg, are you? I'm sorry, Casey. Go ahead.
I just noticed that you mentioned RGW and its use of return vec, and I would just like to say that the size limitations of return vec have made it very difficult for RGW to use that for anything interesting. So if there's opportunities to increase that, then I would very much support it.
I actually thought that was a very large return, so I'm hoping I'm trying to minimize mine. But
returning a bucket name or something is impossible for us to do.
Yeah.
Greg, are you thinking about just a write-up that would return kind of what changed? How about the op that you could kind of query this information on a pure object basis?
Yeah, so I think Snaplist returns that information, but we want to be able to maintain it as we write, and flush that information back to the MDS for tracking without having to do async.
Well, the snap list returns that information at the I'm not sure how to put it. I think like it basically returns this information at the object store level. It doesn't necessarily reflect the space, like the actual space usage, as the space would be used by Blue Store, for example.
Yeah. And we're not trying to, I'm not trying to cross that barrier. This is just like, oh, you wrote an extra 17 bytes, and the object got bigger.
And your plan is to take advantage of the fact that CephFS has MDS and it can store some metadata, and to maintain the tally of that instead of I see. Well, for RBD, I would be for RBD, I don't think we can. Well, we can probably do something like that, but probably wouldn't want to. So I was more interested in just an ability to query on a per object basis everything down to a single byte as far as the space usage, because the space usage at the kind of, when you look just at the object can be the entire object can be let's say it's like 4 megabytes, and we can't assume that you actually have 4 megabytes used, or we currently do, but that's a worst case assumption. But it sounds like what you're trying to do is something slightly different. But anyway, I'll keep an eye on that. Thread and discussions.
I'm not sure how RBD would want to track that, or how you would do it asynchronously, but ping me and we can talk about it. What that would look like.
Well, I mean, if you envision the asynchronous part is the problem, if you envision an RBD image as just a very big file, and the RBD header object as a place where something could be stored, then potentially we could adopt a similar approach as what you were thinking of for CephFS. But anyway, this is just very kind of early thoughts. I'll keep an eye on your plans.
I think you could do this and just flush it out to the header as a increment size periodically. Though if a client crashes, you won't have a good place to do recovery of that data. But maybe just the next client. Anyway, we can talk about it offline.
Yeah, I think as of kind of, I would probably be more interested in just improving the status quo of, we have a command which, you run and then it goes and scans every object, which can, take a while, but currently that command isn't, it still isn't guaranteed to return the byte counts that would accurately sum up to what CephDF or CephDF detail command would show for the pool that, if you sum up all of the numbers for all of the RBD images in that pool, and that pool only has RBD images and nothing else in it, the user would expect the tally to match what they see in the Ceph DF or DF detail outputs, and that's currently not the case. Or it doesn't have to be the case, I guess.
Yeah, I did think about that and decided I didn't want to try and fix that problem here. Although it would be convenient for some people, it's just too fragmentary and across too many different interfaces.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, that's all I had.
All right. Any other comments or questions or topics that people want to bring up? All right. If not, I think that was a really great session. So thanks everybody for contributing, and see you all in the next month. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you very much.